Hey folks, I am Rebecca, blonde in the belly of the beast. And today I think I have my most controversial guest for this channel, at least. Like, I've had like Gypsy Crusader and all these edgelords and everything on. But of all the people that I've had on, the one that's going to piss off my own audience the most, I think it's definitely you.
I love
You're
that.
making waves. Yeah, totally. This is Rad Femme Hitler. Her Twitter account is at Hollow Earth Turf. She's hilarious. Very polarizing Twitter account. I felt like I just had to talk to you. And so when you finally answered my DMs, like months of DMs of me being like, be my friend, please answer me. I'm not crazy. And I have this like whole dialogue in my mind about how like I brought you into the right wing and you hated me for what I did to your life. And then I was like, oh, well, she just hates me. And then finally you're like, oh, I just didn't see your DMs. I was like, what?
No, okay, I'm gonna defend that real quick. I am horrible at managing my DMs, like horrible at it. I can't even manage more than one group chat at a time. Like I don't know what that is. I just like I get notifications in there and it's like they just kind of disappear immediately from my mind. Also, so typically if like it's someone like there's kind of like a group of people I know like I need to respond to, like, that are like friends and stuff or whoever. But I just didn't realize that was you, like, actually at all. And I remember like briefly reading the message and I'm like, who's this man like trying to fuck with me?
No,
Because
no.
I looked at it too fast. And I get so many
Ah,
weird DMs that like kind of try to do stuff like that. So I
yeah.
think it's just your brain just kind of auto does that.
I hear you. You auto filtered me with your woman brain,
I know, right?
and that's what happened. I actually didn't know you did interviews until recently, and I listened to a few of them to prepare for this. Alexa, what is her name?
Oh,
Help
Kushida.
me. Yes, I saw your interview with her, which was very lovely, and it was just a cozy chat. And then I look at the comments, and it's like scathing, just
I know.
scathing. I'm like, after I listened to it, I was like, okay, like that's kind of the vibe I want to go for in my interview. And like, she asked a lot of good questions and everything like that. And then just so much hate. I mean, so I assume that everybody's going to be really pissed off. I
Yeah,
seem to be really worried about that.
that was a fun one too. Alex is really really sweet. And she's a good interviewer. We had a
Yeah.
really fun conversation. And like I don't think anything I was saying there was like really worthy of that, but I think it's just like her audience that she's, cultivated over the years. Obviously, I was just they weren't going to be the happiest to hear from me. And I remember this one guy, he made like this whole like YouTube video, like picking apart the whole interview and like analyzing it. And it was so like he gave like his whole like screed on it. And I'm like, dude, I'm not that important. Like this is wild.
Well, yeah, none of us are that important.
Yeah.
It is crazy the effort that people go to try to dissect all the things we say. I'm just gabbing on the internet. That's
I know.
literally what it's not that big of a deal. It's fine. I don't want you to have to share too much. So whatever you're comfortable with, but I think your genesis is really important to discuss because there is this phenomenon, and I hear about it on the inside. I say that like I'm in prison or something. Um, of women rejecting the dissident right after wholly embracing it
Mm.
because of their experience in the movement. I don't want to put anybody on blast, but I knew of this girl who she was like 30 or something,
Mhm.
and some guy came to ask her out at a conference, and she was pretty and 30, and no crazy history or anything like that. And so he asked her out, and she's like, "Oh, okay." And then he was like, "Well, how old are you?" And she's like, "I'm 30." And then he said, "I select for fertility," and he walked away. And like that's when I was looking at the movement, and I was like, "We got a real problem here," because it was just cruel, like make an excuse, or even if somebody like ghosted me, it's better than that, right? Like it's
It's
got to be
also
better
just
than that.
like illogical. I don't know. I think like this way of thinking is so like antithetical to like actually finding like love and connection. You're just going to like everything they complain about, I guess, with the dating app universe where it's like and everything being commodified and like neoliberalism, all this stuff. I don't think that they realize how much they're actually like they're followers of this religion that they supposedly find all these problems with. 30, guess what? You're actually still plenty fertile at 30. I'm sorry. 30 is not 37. There's a lot of time there.
Yeah.
And that's actually the normal age for like women who are college educated to like get married and start having kids at. And most of those people are going to have plenty of healthy, high IQ children. Actually, those children tend to fare better statistically. So
yes. I mean, the empty egg carton is something of a myth. In that, I mean, of course, your eggs are depleted over your fertile lifespan. However, this 90% of eggs gone by the time you're 30, that is actually true. But you start losing eggs when you're a fetus.
Yes.
And then you I think half of your eggs are gone by the time you go through puberty.
Yes.
And then like 75% by the time that you're at peak fertility.
It's a huge misunderstanding. I mean, first of all, you're starting out with millions. So like 90% of millions is still a lot of eggs.
Right. Yeah. Of course your fertility diminishes as you get older. I'm not trying to say that. But everybody should try to have children younger, but if it doesn't work out that way or you can't make it happen, you shouldn't stop trying if you want.
No, not at all.
You should keep trying to look for love. We should start even before that though. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how you came to the dissident right? I don't even think my audience knows that you used to be right wing.
Oh,
you
really?
are kind of still right wing. You have a nuanced perspective, which is why I want to talk to you.
I mean, I'm not a lib. I know people on here will love to call me that all the time, but it's funny because the libs will call me like a fascist.
That would be awesome if you were really a fascist. I mean, I'm there for it.
It's just one of those things when you're like, I don't know, kind of somewhere in the middle that, you're going to hear like you're going to hear you're a part of every sort of movement possible. Just depending on who's actually looking at your stuff.
Right.
But and I've talked about this before, but I obviously I can go over this again because it sounds like your audience probably doesn't even know. But I grew up like in a conservative Republican family, not a religious one, particularly, not like hyper religious. We were Mormon for a couple years, but honestly, that kind of came out of more the fact that my mom is just a little bit of a hippy dippy, too high in openness kind of lady in many ways. And we were living overseas at the time. And my parents are, have been divorced a very long time. And this guy who was at the Mormon church, like he lived in our building and he clearly like, I have an attractive mother. He was really into her. So
into your hot mom, is that what you're saying?
I know, with a kid in tow, and she was already in her 30s. So guess what? It's not quite what they say. So basically he was like, oh yeah, you should really come to our church and stuff. And so we ended up being Mormons for a little while. But he was in the military, he ended up getting shipped off. So they didn't end up like dating. But yeah. Anyways, I grew up, kind of like a normie, conservative, standard Republican family. They all voted for Bush and, then Mitt Romney and all that, right? Pretty standard Republicans that people are just like, we need small government, that kind of deal.
Right.
And then, so I always considered myself, Republican, as one does when you kind of take on the politics of your family,
right?
Typically. Especially at a young age. And then I went off to college and this was like really in the throes, I would say, of like hookup culture when I was in school. This is before like Gen Z, stopped having sex because they're too into their phones. We had social media, but it wasn't like as pervasive, So the hookup culture is really big. I was never comfortable with that, that whole lifestyle, and everything I was seeing was just kind of like bleak and a bit sad to me. And I had this reaction, I guess you could say, to like liberal feminism. I kind of thought like, wow, this is like a scam. This is actually really bad for women in many ways. The things they are telling you are empowering really aren't. Like it's essentially like, oh, go sell your body. How cool. I really had a problem with that, and I reacted to it pretty severely, and I became like this. I'm an anti-feminist and all this stuff that now I look back on it and I'm like, okay, you're a bit cringe, but whatever. I was 19.
We were all a little cringe.
We were, especially back then, you know?
Mm.
And so I just got in, and then I discovered libertarianism and Ayn Rand, as one does in college. So I got really into that. And I was like an anti-feminist. I liked Ayn Rand. And I'm like, oh yeah, the free market's the best thing ever. All the typical stuff that kind of right-wing people do in their 20s, their early 20s. And eventually, like, being into Ron Paul led to being into Trump, as that kind of happened back then.
Okay, so you were into Trump.
Oh yeah.
So we lost you not that long ago, is what you're saying.
I mean, well, now it's been a minute. It's quite a bit of time's gone by, but yeah, I was like a Ron Pauler, and a lot of the Ron Paul people from 2012 then became Trump people in 2016, me included. And then, as I think what happened with a lot of women in this space who are really into all these ideas, they, being women who were minded towards family life and wanting a husband and wanting kids, all that stuff. And I very much wanted that. The problem is we started dating men in these circles. And when we were all just friends and having fun, the jokes seem like they're jokes, and you don't really take it that seriously. And you don't think there's really going to be, I guess, all the consequences. You don't really think all that through. You think you're all just having fun together and you're friends and you get along. And I still enjoy a lot of my friendships with men. As someone who has more male interests,
Yeah, but you got to admit that they all probably want to have sex with you.
I'm sure. Yeah.
And then sure. A friendship, it is not.
Right. Absolutely. And that's kind of what you come to discover too. You enjoy being around them, you enjoy being friends with them, and then you actually start dating these guys. And it'd be one thing if it had just happened to me, but this was so pervasive in the whole community. It seemed that, we're all kind of posting one thing publicly, but then there's these private groups where the women are congregating and they're all sharing their relationship problems. And every single one of these guys, almost without fail, was always horrible, crazy, mean, just cruel, and borderline abusive, if not outright abusive.
Yeah.
It was so widespread. It was everywhere. You couldn't escape it. It just seemed all of these men had essentially personality disorders, and all of their, all their jokes about women and all hating women, it's really not a joke. It actually is. Who knew? They actually really do feel that way. And those feelings and those beliefs are going to affect how they treat the women in their lives, especially the woman that they're dating.
Right.
So I think a lot of women over time, they realized how serious all of these, all these narratives and comments were, and how it had real world implications for them that were really not good, not just not good on a individual level, but how they were actually ripping apart families. They were actually really, at the end of the day, these values actually were really anti-family, because so many people were, in these abusive marriages or getting divorced because it's just, you can't you can't really be happy and find love in that context of someone who, hates you.
That's definitely true. I think that this is a broader problem with the right wing. It's a problem with the left wing too. But most of the guys that I've met have been absolutely solid, focused, nice guys, right attitude. But I have seen this unsavory element be introduced into the dissonant right, whereby just absolute douchebags see this as an opportunity to find a submissive wife and exploit her desire to return to traditionalism, but fail to offer security or protection, which is a violation of this tacit agreement of
Right.
traditionalism. But more broadly, this is a major problem that we all have in modern marriages and relationships. I see a weird mix of egalitarianism in almost all marriages, even these so-called traditional marriages. Ballerina Farm's a perfect example, although we are not Ballerina Farm. She's married to a multi-billionaire, I think. They're supposedly a traditional family, but she works her ass off. Did you read that article where she said that sometimes she can't get out of bed for a week because she's just so exhausted? And, of course, our situation can't be applied to the rest of us. But my point is that in an attempt to return to traditionalism, almost every single married couple that I know has some hybridized egalitarian model whereby the woman does the majority of the childcare and home duties, but also brings in a large portion of the income.
Yeah.
And then there it is. That blows the whole traditionalism thing away. So what are modern couples supposed to do this? Because I'm not seeing a lot of success in people actually return to traditionalism. I have a lot of friends in this sphere, and none of them truly have traditional marriages. Almost always the woman is working outside of the home.
Yeah, 100%. Most men can't afford that, or they really I think they'd rather have the extra security of the extra money. I mean, this is America. Like, people here value money. Like, that's just the culture. And most people aren't going to want to give up, a certain level of lifestyle to have someone stay at home, especially because these are the same men who, although they like to have this message of it's the most important job in the world, why would you want to do PowerPoints? You can raise your beautiful babies. And there's always this posturing and this lip service about how it's so beautiful to be a Sam and raise your children. But you push them on it a bit, and then the mask always slips off. They're always like, well, I provide so you can just sit at home all day and do nothing. Yeah, it's always the same thing. They really think that they want Sams, but at the same time, they really believe that Sams don't actually do anything, and they certainly don't do anything of value. They think that they're just paying you, I guess, to be like a sort of trophy, but most of them really can't afford that. So then they're resentful of it, because it's like, well, why? You're not actually, they don't believe you're contributing. So it doesn't surprise me that's how it's turned out whatsoever. I don't think that these guys actually value the traditional woman's sphere. I think that how they claim many modern feminists see the domestic sphere, I would say that they're talking about themselves. It's kind of a projection, and they're kind of dated on this. Yes, it's true that there was a period of, I would say, of feminism where feminists really looked down on the domestic sphere, but that's actually really changed recently. Like, the younger Gen Z feminists, they actually do value that a lot. And I think feminism has shifted a lot more from kind of like this 90s girl boss type of deal, 2000s, where women should just try to do everything men do in exactly their way, because the only thing that's of value is what men do, to actually, they really want to defend what is traditionally the female sphere. Whereas I actually don't think traditionalists want to defend that at all. I think they actually kind of hate it, and they go out of their way to make sure that they feel that you do nothing. It's that constant argument of, well, you owe us because men built the world and men did everything. And I'm like, how can you have a civilization, or quote, the modern world, without women's unpaid contributions to raise up the next generation? That is obviously a part of the project that a civilization,
or at a minimum birth them, which is why this autonomous womb thing is akin to some sort of masturbatory MGTOW fantasy. They talk about it all the time. We won't need women. It's like, I watched my husband with an infant, and he does not know what to do. It's like he's holding a loaded gun. Like there is no world in which men are going to be good at raising infants. It's not in them.
No, and I mention this all the time, that it's so funny that they think they'll just get rid of women by having you know,
Sex bots.
by sex bots and like what do they call it? Like artificial wombs. And like you realize like birthing kids is just like the first step, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you gonna raise them? Because you're not raising them now. So
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
you're about to.
Yeah, that's definitely true. How do you think the pressure to get married is affecting young women on the right? It's my personal belief that that pressure is causing them to make poor marital decisions.
Yes.
I'm not saying that like the pressure that they are not responsible for their own decisions. I'm saying that they're feeling the heat in their early 20s and they're naive and they are marrying the wrong people because they're getting all this empty egg carton thing, and then they're getting divorced. And then if they would have just waited a few years to marry the right person, they probably wouldn't be getting divorced. And I've seen it so much on the right. I've seen it so much. Like I can't act like this isn't a pattern.
I've seen it countless times. I mean,
Yeah.
it is a serious problem. I think if you looked at the divorce rate of like right-wing Twitter, it would be one of the highest like in the developed world.
It's really bad because I know these people don't want to get divorced. I know they don't, but you know, they're 23, they're 25, and people are saying like, you got to marry, you got to get married right now. Got to do it. There's so much pressure. I didn't get married until my late 20s, and like the emails I was getting from people about it, it was just so it was the most stressful time of my whole life.
Yeah, I know. The pressure is from this this corner, you know, of politics is really, really bad. And I agree 100%. That is absolutely what I've seen, is that it pushes women into almost always bad marriages. Like you can just tell they're out there fighting for their lives. They're really struggling. And because they're pushed into a marriage so young, when they're not really that ready for it themselves, but also they don't really know how to like pick a good partner. They don't know what to look for. You're 23. Sorry, but like you're an idiot. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I guess our objective as moms should be to help our kids get ready earlier to get married.
yeah.
I don't think that all 23-year-olds are idiots. And I know people that have got married that are with their high school sweethearts in great marriages. But I think a lot of that is luck of the draw, and then being raised well to be
Yes.
mature when you're a teenager.
100%.
And then being able to recognize the signs of somebody that is abusive.
Yes. Certainly there's some luck to it, but I agree. It's, you know, you can say this to your blue in the face all day. People should get married when they're 22. People should get married when they're 23. You can't undo the fact that boomers did not raise us to be ready for that at 22.
Totally.
So you're going to have to actually live in the reality that you live in and not the one you wish you had. And I just don't think that these people like want to face that at all.
But it's bleak. It's dark to face that, because you have to admit a lot of realities about human nature and about men and about women, and it's painful, and it makes you turn inward and hate yourself, but also hate men. It's just a disaster. It's easier to entertain the delusion. Like denialism is really comforting for people. But one of the issues that I'm seeing in this sphere is that there is a chasm between people that see marriage as functional, or, you know, financial, there are practical implications, and those that want to get married for love. And there's so much black and white thinking that I'm not seeing a lot of people that overlap these concepts. Like, I think when you get married, you have to think like, I love this person, and if the love fades, there's still all of these practical implications. You really have to incorporate both of those mentalities. Maybe this was always a problem, though. I don't even think this is a new thing. But do you think that people need both love and utility to have a functional marriage?
I think for the vast majority of people, yeah, 100%. You need to consider both. And part of why marriage can be so hard is that like finding someone who strikes that right balance with you
is really difficult.
Is actually really difficult. Like it does not. You really have to look for it, or you have to figure out a way make it work somehow. And both you need to be on board with that. It's not easy. Some people luck out and they just meet that person that's, you know, it's just gonna work, right? Like they're just two perfectly aligned puzzle pieces. But for most people, it's not gonna be that. I think there are some people who can purely have it for utility, but that is so rare in our culture. And I just think almost on like this, if you want to get like esoteric race sciencey into it, I just don't think white people are the most cut out for that. I don't know. Like that's just not.
It's not part of our culture.
Yeah.
Indians have a very, I hate to look to Indian culture in a positive way.
It's very,
but
yeah.
but I mean their rate of divorce within arranged marriages is very low. And I've known people that have had arranged marriages, and they say like, you're put in this situation where you know you can't divorce. So you just start building the love one block at a time. And some of them were in really strong marriages 10, 20 years down the road. But we have no pressure to stay together. Oh, no pressure. Like I've seen another myth that I'm seeing is like nobody will ever be with a single mom. I've seen these single moms come out here. The dating market is so favorable to women. I'm seeing single moms come out of disastrous situations and fucking kill it in the dating market.
It's 100% true. If you're hot, you're hot. I'm sorry, but like men are dogs. Like in the sense that you know, they don't think that far ahead often. If you're an attractive woman and you have a nice vibe, I mean, sure, there's some guys who will reject you for having a kid, but there's a lot that won't.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you definitely eliminate a certain percentage of men from the future dating pool, but I don't think it's as bleak as men in the right like really want to feel like it is.
Yeah.
Like all things I'm learning, the truth is somewhere in the middle. I've heard you say that men and women today have much more in common than I don't want to put words into your mouth, but are coming to the same solutions for different reasons, which I completely agree with. We're both afflicted by malaise, but we're dealing with it differently. Men are creating all of these fake competitive environments. I don't even think that they're realizing that they're probably doing it to raise their testosterone. So like competitive environments with the gym, they're creating a fake sexual market with pornography and then video games. It's this like war, this fabricated war scenario. And women are doing it because they deal with malaise differently. And I heard you talk about this, but like girl bossing it and trying to impart meaning in their lives with these kind of mundane jobs and things like that. So we're dealing with the same problem differently, but we're coming to the same conclusions. Like some semblance of a return to a traditional lifestyle is going to be necessary. How can both men and women, find true meaning in their lives that doesn't further pit us against one another? Like, do you believe that men and women are fundamentally at odds?
Kinda.
Oh,
sometimes, yeah. But I mean, that's just kind of that's the whole. It's not necessarily like a bad thing or a black pill. That's just kind of the human condition. And I think that's something that's been kind of just baked into the cake since always. And people have been writing about these sorts of things since antiquity. Like we think a lot of our frustrations with the opposite gender are something like really new. You know, and as a result of modernity, and we think that I don't know, back in the 50s everything was just like perfect, but you know, these complaints and these, you know, these ways that we just sometimes can't get along and can't understand each other, you know, people have been writing about this for eons. Like it's nothing new. And I think there's actually a lot that's kind of comforting in that.
yeah.
And again, like if you're like Christian, I don't know, I just see it as part of the way God kind of made us. And I think
that's so cruel though. We need each other, but we're opposed fundamentally. That's so sad and depressing.
Yeah, but it also is kind of beautiful in a way too. I I
So
don't
what do
know.
you
Like,
think men and women should do? Should we be married and kind of living our separate lives?
oh, so I've
If you
talked
talk about a
about
female commune, I can't.
no, I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to talk about is actually something quite traditional. Um, and I talked about this on Alex Kashuda's podcast as well, is that actually a lot of the areas where you see like men and women kind of got along the best, and actually the women had equal rights, is always in these spaces where men and women were just apart from each other, not always, but for a big chunks of the year, right? Like they just had more separate spheres, and I guess there was more mystery, there was more time apart, there was just it's it's hard to try to put all that together in a lot of traditional societies, especially ones where, you know, like I said, women had more equal standing. It was because the men were away a lot.
Yeah.
Like, you know, in Sparta, the men were always at war, so the women had to really take care of the fort at home. On the American frontier, that's actually, women had voting rights there long before women back on the East Coast did, and it's because the men were just away a lot. The women had to, you know, be given responsibility. So you just don't have the luxury of putting women in as much a subservient role, because if you're gone all the time as a man, women need to be in charge of a lot while you're away. Like you need to be able to trust them. You also see this. So um, my family comes from Frisia back in Europe. It's an area of coastal Germany in the Netherlands. And traditionally, there, like Frisian women had more rights than a lot of women in surrounding cultures. And it was because the men were fishermen or whalers, whatever it was. So they were, again, away at sea for so long. And sometimes I think the answer is that, and I've kind of like tweeted about this facetiously, but there's a lot of truth in it. And I think men would kind of be happier with it too. Men need to be like off on maybe their little adventure, their journey, or their task for a while. And I think they get a little insane and they get a little mean when they're at home too much. Um, and this is also, you see this with like retirement. They call it like retired wife syndrome or something in Japan. The men come home and the women just start to fucking hate their husbands after they retire because they're just home all the time. They start to drive them crazy. I think men need more time off at sea or something. And it's, unfortunately, we don't really have that in modern society, except for like, you know, certain jobs. But
Yeah. That's maybe we're just on top of each other all. Maybe we're
yes,
interacting with each other too
too
much.
much. Yeah, we need more time apart from each other to miss each other and to not be constantly just nitpicking at each other. It's hard because we are different and we kind of do need our own spaces, and maybe we've forced ourselves together a little too much.
Well, that includes having these micro interactions with men 4,000 times a day online. Like,
Oh
I
yeah.
worry that those of us that are chronically online are extrapolating to the entire gender based on what we interact with. And I see this in the whatever podcast, things like that. Guys
Yes.
that watch this stuff, you know, they have a panel of actual prostitutes and they start to think that like the girl that's the cashier at their local grocery store is just some kind of OnlyFans whore when she probably just has like a normal life and a normal job or whatever.
Yep.
And then women like us that are on Twitter, because it's just an onslaught of, you know, criticisms about my age, face, whatever else, you know, I start to think that all men are assholes. But do you think that you and I are also extrapolating our experiences to the general public that don't have these same resentments and extreme experiences as keyboard warriors like us?
I mean, I don't want to say that like, no, not at all, because I think that's just delusional, right? Like obviously if you're on the internet seeing this every day, it is going to affect your perspective, and if you think it doesn't, like, you're just lying to yourself. But I will say that there's there's a lot of stuff that I know is particular to this part of Twitter. That's, you know, that's their own hang up. They don't really live in the real world. I spend a lot of time around normies. Like, that's actually most of my real life. It's not like around Twitter people every day. So I think I do a decent job, I would say, of kind of knowing what the difference is, just because I have such a different online world than an offline one.
Well, I hope all of us do. Good Lord.
Well, a lot of these people don't is the problem. Their whole world is just like people that they met through Twitter. And they really don't like, quote, normies. So they self-segregate. But there's a lot of stuff you see that, you know, from these people that are really online that you do see with normal guys too. Like, there is just kind of this very similar strain of, quote, like, misogyny. You know, these guys didn't like invent this because they went online and they just were spending too much time on 4chan. Like, these things are kind of already baked into our culture. And I was seeing a lot of this stuff about men, you know, prior to me being on the internet. Boys in high school they're kind of evil. Like,
Girls in high school are evil
yeah.
too, though. Man, these bitches. We used to sit around and play this game where we just sat in a circle and we took turns telling each other what was wrong with each other's bodies and faces.
You did that in high school?
Yeah.
I thought that's like just what they do in like sorority recruiting.
No, we were probably like 13. So I get 8th grade, freshman year, something like that. Yeah.
Wow, brutal. Yeah.
Brutal. I mean, that is so fucking brutal.
Kids are awful.
Yeah, it's really bad. I mean, high school guys were dicks and everything, but this wasn't my experience with dating at all. It was not at all, because I was dating in Seattle. So like every guy I would meet would be an obsequious pussy. And I was like, I can't, I have no tolerance for this. I can't do it. But like 99% of the guys that I went on one date with they seemed like nice, normal, low T guys.
Yeah, the thing with that is that I think with that type of guy, a lot of those same bad traits are there. It's just you're not gonna see them until you're actually like dating with this person and living with them.
Yeah.
They're like too low T to be upfront about all that stuff. And maybe they're too low T to even really realize it, to be honest. But it does kind of come out. Like, there is a difference between, quote, normie average guys and right wingers, but there is a similar run through. Like, they did ultimately grow up in the same culture, so you're going to see a lot of the same problems. I think it's more kind of a matter of degree. But real quick about your dating in Seattle, am I remembering that this was you correctly? That sorry, I don't know why I remember this story in particular, but you said that, like, I'm pretty sure it was you, that he didn't know how to parallel park and you had to like park the car for him.
Oh yeah, that was so bad.
Yeah, I remember reading that and being like, oh no, that I would have been so done.
Well, because I made that video, gosh, I'm coming up on like 9 years ago.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. And what I was describing was that I had the ick. And I couldn't figure out, I didn't know as much then, but I see a man like not being able to operate machinery or something like that, not being able to do simple handiwork, not being able to parallel park the car. And my womb says, this guy will let you get eaten by a bear.
Yes.
And I couldn't figure out like why I was so disgusted by it, but I was like, no, like I cannot. Have you ever seen the movie Dancer in the Dark?
No.
Oh, it's a terrible movie. It's like emotionally manipulative. It has Bjork in it. It was just a fucking terrible movie. I watched it with my boyfriend, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. And I look over and at the end of it, he's crying. And I think I broke up with him on the spot. Like I was like, nope, I can't. I just cannot. So people have always thought that like I'm kind of a cutthroat bitch, but men also need to understand that there are certain things that they can do, and it's not necessarily the ick or anything like that, but women don't want to see you engage in super feminine behavior because it upsets their biological necessity. Like, and they don't even understand it themselves.
Yeah, that's funny. This story, I know it's like already that old. I guess it was before we had the word ick.
Yeah.
So that's what you were describing and didn't quite realize it. For me with the movie, I think what would have given me the ick is not specifically the crying, although it depends on the type of crying. I've never been one who's upset with, little wetness in the eyes or something like that. I think like the full on like sobbing is too much for me like that. But more importantly, I think it's that he was crying about a movie that was so bad.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was
Yeah.
just it was just so like transparent and emotionally manipulative. I'm like, you
Yes.
fell for this, you
Yes.
fag. Oh,
That's what would upset me. If it were
Yeah.
like genuinely like a really good, like beautiful movie or something,
I get over that. Yeah.
yeah, a couple manly tears, I'd actually be like, okay,
I'd find it endearing. Yeah.
you have depth. That's cool. But yeah, I totally get it. If it's like really bad and transparently like just trying to manipulate you and you're crying for that, ick.
I see that you've come to this appreciation of women, which I kind of appreciate because I've spent so long just hating myself because of my
Same.
female tendencies. I'm like, and now I have daughters, all daughters, and I'm like, I cannot raise them to be self-loathing. Like I got to look at this from a different perspective where they're I almost said empowered by their femininity. I have to kill myself now, right? This is a nightmare. Rad Fem Hitler, you did this to me. You did this to me. But I have to raise them to realize that being a woman is a gift and that they're going to be bestowed certain gifts and they should use them benevolently. And I want them to appreciate like the mysticism of being a woman. And so I have to address this part of me that hates myself in a healthy way. And the healthy way that I do this is by reading your Twitter. Do you ever hate yourself? Like hate these qualities? Because women have some bad qualities. We're emotional. I sometimes make decisions that are supposed to be rational 100% based on how I feel at that moment. That's a nightmare. That's terrible.
That's just being human though. I really don't think that that's a male versus female trait. And we've actually like studied this on a brain level. People just make decisions like with a wholly different part of their brain. And then your conscious reasoning just comes in and rationalizes it after the fact. It's true. That's how the vast majority of people work unless you actually make like a concerted effort to not do that. But genuinely like free will for the average person kind of doesn't exist.
What is happening right now? You don't believe in free will?
I mean, I believe it does exist. Like,
are you just talking about biological determinism in its most?
I'm not a biological. I'm not in the sense that like I think we have to be that way, but I would say that you have to make a conscious choice to actually operate with free will. And most people will never do that. So for most people really aren't really, they're not really operating like on that level. And I actually think a lot of kind of like religious texts and rites are actually trying to get you to do that specifically. To me, like
wow, this is taking a dark turn.
Yeah. Well, like I said,
shit.
I don't think it has to be that way, but that's usually what happens, right? Like people are mostly controlled by the flesh, and to not be that, to actually like, if you want to put it like in Christian terms, like to choose Christ, like that's what your free will is actually for, right?
Right.
So
yeah, and it could be argued that the basis of free will is rejecting your vices, and that's a problem for men and women.
Yeah.
So what do you think are the biggest differences between the sexes then?
Oh gosh, the biggest differences. It's just what we're oriented towards, I think, is the fundamental difference. I think women are so oriented towards like other people and community or love or whatever you want to call it, but we just have, I think we just view the world in this lens of it's not just purely us. Like there's, and it's because we literally have another being in our body that we birth and create, right? Like, and I also think this is why women tend to be more religious and more spiritual as well. Um, Men have this whole other perspective where, and it's kind of just them. Like they don't actually, you know, they never have to share their body with another being. They don't even, like, sex for them is not about like letting someone else into their body, taking someone else's DNA into their body. Like it's just such a different, it's just such a different reality. And I think it really colors completely how we see the world.
Yeah.
Like women, I don't mean to be like, I don't mean to be like such a huge female chauvinist, but women really, like, we just do have more empathy and we do think more about things in more of like this holistic kind of context. And men are just so linear and kind of like one thing at a time. Like we just approach the world in such a different way.
That's true. I mean, and I think male and female, why did I say that's true? I like almost completely disagree with you. I think that men and women do share some sacrificial qualities. Like I'm seeing a lot of people in the live chat say that men sacrifice themselves completely for others. But
how often do they do that?
In wars and things like that, they sacrifice for their families, but women also sacrifice for their families. Giving birth is a massive sacrifice, and ask any mother if she would die for her children, she would. I mean, I think that we're so hostile to one another that we can't even see each other and our good qualities. And I think that this is a huge problem. But my MO is to increase the white birth rate and to reduce the amount of divorce. And I think that one of the ways that we can do that is for people to appropriately adjust their expectations, especially out of what they're going to get in a marriage. And so I was talking to one of my friends and she told me like, yeah, I'm in this marriage and like, well, I'm never going to get divorced. And the only real problem is that he does not give a shit about my inner world. And I was thinking, well, that really sums it up. Like if women knew when they were getting into marriage that your husband is not going to care about your inner world, wouldn't it change the whole dynamic? If you can accept that when you get married, wouldn't that change the whole dynamic of your marriage? Then you can get those things from your female friends. You can have other hobbies. You can do all this other stuff. You don't depend on your husband so much to like know your being. And I think that that's how Victorian English were, and a lot of these societies that you were talking about. I don't think that these men expect, or these women expected these men to like peer into their soul and become one with them. And I think that that's what we're expecting.
Agree with what I'm saying then.
Like, I do. It's just, I'm a romantic and I find that heartbreaking. I find that
heartbreaking. It is. And I think it's one of those things that women in the past knew, like that was, you know, that's how it was. And it wasn't really that much of a question. That's how you were raised to know it to be. And, you know, sometime in the post-war period, we started painting this whole other image of that wasn't quite reality, but it was an ideal. And I think women, you know, now who are young adults are realizing that that isn't real usually for most people. Most marriages aren't really going to have that quality. And if they do, it's going to be like after the guy's like in his 50s and his testosterone is just like completely plummeted.
But that's okay. Like the more realities that we accept about each other, the better off we'll be. Like, I don't really think that truth is going to harm us.
No,
in any way.
It's bad. I think we need to equip young people with the truth, particularly young women. And instead we have sold them on a lot of junk, frankly. And we've set them up to be really disappointed and to not have I don't know, realistic expectations. And part of the problem, particularly in American culture, is that it's just so alienated. And because of that, you end up needing so much from
More
your,
from your spouse. Yeah,
yes,
that's
yes.
true. Yes, and that was a problem. That is a modern problem. So we live in this society of abundance, which definitionally has eradicated necessity. So men and women, they don't need each other in the same way that they used to, or
Mhm.
at least that illusion. And as such, we aren't forced to work together to survive and to have kids. And there's little societal pressure to get married. So this necessity, now that it's absent, are we going to witness the death of marriage?
For a large chunk of the population, yes. Not entirely. It will be like, like in Huxley's
Brave New World.
Brave New World, right? There ends up being like these two parallel worlds, and you've got the one people that are living like savages, and you've got the other people that they have, it's very quote civilized, but it's very sterile, and they just branch off completely differently from each other. They're just living in two parallel realities on the same planet. I think that's where we end up. I think we're going to see just two big divergences. We've had this monoculture and we've had this stability in this post-war period, and we had these decreases in income inequality for a long time, and now it's just going to keep diverging
Did you
like
say
that.
decreases inequality?
In income inequality, yeah, we did for a while, right?
Oh, okay.
And now it's increasing.
This double negative. I told you about my pregnancy
Yeah.
retardation. This is a huge problem. I had to have her check the time zones like 9 times. I'm like, when are we doing this thing? And yeah, and I think that I don't know what your religious orientation is, but I think in the absence of religion, that I'm not really sure that marriage has a lot of utility.
Like I said, I think it will continue to work for a certain percentage of people. They'll find plenty of use in it and it'll work out for them. But that other half, it's not going to be in the cards. I think that's where we're headed. I think we're headed to two like completely divergent populations, and it is dystopian, but unfortunately I think that's the reality.
How do we rectify this? Radfem Hitler, how do we rectify this?
I don't think you can right now.
This is awful.
I mean, look, like I think there's like this kind of modern Western idea we're always in control and we can like shape history however we want it. But I think history just most of the time it's kind of doing its own thing. And there's an element of faith and not faith, fate and destiny in the world. And a lot of things you just have to let happen and realize it's part of, our story of humanity, and you're going to have to figure out how to navigate within that world. But you can't that's the best thing you can do for yourself. It is not to be stuck in this is how it should be, this is how I wish it were, if we could just do X it would be like this. I think you just have to kind of, as a normal layperson, normal middle class, American, you just have to figure out how you're going to adapt to that. And actually, I think that's why the Jews have done as well as they have, is
Oh
because
no, are you rounding
no,
this out with some JQ talk? Is this happening?
I'm just saying, guys. I know you all love to hate on them there, but I think they have that attitude about a lot of things, and I think that's why they just keep making it through it somehow. So maybe white people need
Wait, you think
to
that
take
the
that
Jews
route.
are making it because they're so passive?
No, I think they're just adaptable. Like they're just going to adapt to
Okay,
the
that's a
situation.
nice way to say sneaky. They're sneaky, Radfem Hitler. That's
Okay.
what's going on here.
Look, it's the sneaky animals that in the end win. So maybe you guys need to adopt some sneakiness. That's all
Well,
I'm
you heard it
saying.
here. You all should be more like Jews. That's what Radfem Hitler is saying. More like Jews. Did I
Take
see an Israel flag in your profile? What is
Oh yeah,
happening?
it's because I have a meme that I am Latina, Jewish, Chinese, and English. Yeah.
You know, everyone thinks you're Chinese.
I know.
How did that even get started?
Oh, there's this like funny photo of me that I had on my Clubhouse, and I'd put it up on my Clubhouse because it's such a funny photo of me and I think I look Chinese in it. So I kind of put it up there as like this sort of like fake docs in a way. I thought it was really funny.
Oh,
And inevitably someone did post it. This guy
right. Yeah.
posted it, trying to dox me and he told everyone I had like connections to Obama, because if you go down like the Clubhouse invites, like it's like 6 degrees of separation to get to Obama. And I'm like, that could work with literally anyone. I don't think he understands how that works, but
Are you hot? Are you blonde?
I am blonde, yeah.
Whoa! I knew it. We
I was
got
born
one,
blonde.
guys. Ah, very good. Very good. Oh, I was going to ask you another question about that though. Is there any way that we can be psychologically healthy with an abundance mindset?
You have to start peating.
What the hell is that?
Like Ray Pete. Do you know about Ray Pete?
Peating.
Yeah.
I am like somewhat familiar with Ray Pete.
Yeah. You gotta start peating. That's the only way it's gonna work out.
We got to explain it.
It's just kind of this whole philosophy of like bioenergetics, and people try to like kind of say it's a diet, but that's a little simplified. But it's just, if you want to think of it as just a diet, it's this idea that like metabolism is really like determining your health essentially, and how to support that. So a lot of weight loss is centered around like calories in, calories out, whereas, and the problem with that is that, you know, when you reduce your calories, you actually end up like long term, you end up reducing your metabolism. So you're actually just going to keep having to reduce them. And then when you reduce your metabolism, your IQ goes down, you become more tired, you age more. These are all signs of aging, right? So it's just going to be like this runaway train. And so the idea shouldn't be to calorie restrict. It should be your body essentially has like a thermostat that it wants to keep its, you know, its temperature at. And so the idea is, rather than do this like seco stuff and constantly in this mode of like calorie restriction, you need to be supporting your metabolism so that you set your thermostat, just your thermostat will naturally be set higher.
Interesting.
And therefore you're able to actually, you know, eat quite a bit, as long as it's like the right foods that are supportive of your metabolism. And
what about an entire bag of air popped popcorn a day? Can I do that?
I don't think that's peaty, unfortunately.
What?
No, sorry.
It's air popped. There's no seed oil in it.
No seed oil, but I believe, isn't that starch? Like, what even is? Yeah, because corn is starch.
Are you serious? This is a disaster.
Yeah.
Well, you're a bearer of bad news.
I apologize.
Well, on that note, is there anything that you would like to say to the audience? People are so pissed off. Why are you guys so mad?
What are they saying?
I don't know. You know what you would expect. My audience is predominantly male, so I'm sure that they're like really not into this conversation. But you're a very interesting person, and you're one of the few people that actually has a nuanced perspective. I don't think that you're actually a radical feminist, and you come from the right. I think that you have an important perspective, and very few people make me audibly laugh on Twitter. The pinned tweet that you have about men not being ensouled because their mothers didn't orgasm during their conception. Every time I read that, I laugh.
I love that tweet, and I love how angry so many people get at that.
They're
and
so mad.
They bring it up all the time. They're like, "Look, this is what she says," and I'm like, "You guys, this is why you're failing with women, actually, and this is why
you're just a chick on the internet, and it's okay to not take us very seriously.
It's okay to make crazy tweets and have some fun, and honestly, you should all learn to like be in on the joke a bit and laugh. Like, that's funny. That's
it's a cool time to be alive. You can say all sorts of stuff that you can never say before. So check out her Twitter at Hollow Earth Turf. Do you want to say something else? I cut you off, sorry.
Oh, learn to laugh, guys. Like, I get the world is It's fucked up and it's a bit sad, but you've got to learn to laugh at more. You guys take yourself way too seriously. And I assure you, taking the fact that you take yourself so seriously is probably leading to a lot of your problems with women. Because women want to have fun at the end of the day. And
are you going to
end
this with girls just want to have fun? Are you serious, right?
Yes, girls just want to have fun. So men, learn to be fun a bit.
On that note, thank you guys for joining me. I am not a Russian agent. I would like to repeat, I am not a Russian agent. Thank you for joining us. Hollow Earth Turf. Check her out, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.
Bye.